All right. Good evening, good day, everybody, wherever you are. Thanks for tuning in to the Blacks in Technology, the Tech Life, getting hired. So, you ever wonder about what it takes to get hired at some of the top tech companies in the world? Companies like Google, Apple, Salesforce, and Amazon. What skills do you need to succeed? What does the interview process look like? How should a resume be crafted? Well, you're about to find out.
Well, Blacks in Technology proudly presents The Tech Life, Getting Hired. It's going to be a Google Hangout series, web series event that will answer those very questions.
Excellent. And I'm your co-host, Greg Greenlee, along with longtime Blacks in Technology member and bid advisor, Dr. Danielle Smith.
So during this web series, we sit down with people from all aspects of the tech industry, from engineers to HR, business analysts to hiring managers, from some of the top tech companies in the world for practical discussion on getting hired.
And just in case you haven't read our blog, you may be wondering, why are we doing the series called Getting Hired? Why the Tech Life? Since starting a big organization, I've had the opportunity to talk to hundreds, if not thousands, of our members, and I've listened to their stories about what it's like living in tech, from starting companies to going on interviews to working in different environments. The Tech Life is our effort to showcase these stories in a more cohesive way.
So, Getting Hired is the first video installment of the Tech Life series. So, we will feature people in color and tech that are working for larger, high profile tech companies versus the smaller, more entrepreneurial tech companies like startups. So, we did this intentionally to provide some attention to that side of tech that is often overlooked in a lot of conversations, even though it's a really popular career path. So our goal is to have a candid discussion with our participants and have them provide our community with practical and actionable advice that will aid our members in becoming world-class tech professionals. The video series will serve as a valuable, we hope, and informational resource for members in our community. So listen close, take notes, and ask questions.
So what are some of the topics we're going to be covering? We're going to cover a variety of topics that would assist our community with career planning and progression. Those topics will include personal advice, skill development, resume tips, interview strategies, and touch on what to expect once you start and move up the ladder. The point of this portion of the Tech Life series as a whole is to raise the profile of people of color outside of the startup community. Getting Hired will highlight career options in traditional corporations, hopefully serving as a career development resource for those in the Blacks in Technology community that are curious about this route.
All right, so tonight on our show, we have Mike Dorsey, a software engineer at Amazon.
Hi.
So,
Want to introduce Mike a little bit?
Sure.
sure.
So I'm a software engineer at Amazon. I work on the Alexa Amazon Echo project. I've been on that project for about 4 years since it was kind of a baby, and I've been pretty entertained in seeing how it grows. Before that, I worked at a number of companies. Last one was LexisNexis, where I learned a whole bunch of stuff about insurance. So, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for joining us tonight, Mike. We definitely appreciate it. So let's get into this. You're a Georgia native. You're a graduate of Georgia Tech. You hold a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Computer Science. So tell us about your job. Describe your average workday and some of your key responsibilities.
All right. So my average work day, I usually go to a stand-up at about 10:30. I might get in, check some emails, and then go to stand-up, talk about what I did the previous day, what I'm doing today, and what I hope to get accomplished in anything that might be blocking me. Afterwards, pretty much the entire day is either meetings or actually doing the writing of code, building some software, reading code reviews, commenting on code reviews, and just having lots of impromptu meetings to get features built and out. So.
Okay, excellent. So let's take a step back for a bit. Let's talk about how you got started in this field, what your educational background was like. We already went over what you majored in college, but tell us a little bit about a little bit about your graduate degree. What job and experiences have led you to this current position?
All right. So when I was in college, I met this dude named Brian Culver at my student assistant job, and he got me doing some consulting on the side for a few companies, and a company that his brother actually owned down in Macon, Georgia. And so after that, I was still doing IT work, being an information security engineer after I graduated. And I was just like, IT is fun, but I don't really like it. I want to actually write some code and use my degree. So I called him up and said, hey, dude, you should hire me since I did some consulting work and you like it. And you like the work and you want me to come work for you anyway. So he's like, sure. So I did that for a while and then I got promoted into management. And I was just like, I don't think I like management right now. So I moved back to Atlanta and did some work there, a few odd jobs, worked for a 30-year-old startup, and then got the job at LexisNexis. So that's pretty much. And then after LexisNexis, I guess I'd done so much work that my LinkedIn profile said, "Oh man, you got all this stuff." So then recruiters started contacting me, and I went ahead and took Amazon up on their offer. It was like, "All right, I'll come interview with you all," and they liked me enough to hire me. So I was like, "Okay, I'll do that."
All right. So what did you find attractive about the Amazon job in particular?
Well, I knew I would not be bored. And so the thing about insurance scoring algorithms and building back office software is that although you don't necessarily get bored, I did want a bit of a challenge, a bit more money, and I did want to work on something a bit more consumer facing. So when you're building insurance, it's just like, consumers see that in their rate, but they don't actually see the actual impact of what it's doing. So Amazon was like, all right, you can do this, but they didn't tell me what I was working on. I had no idea what I would be working on until the day I got here. So flew up. It was a bit risky. Like, okay, let's see what I'm working on. And then I saw what is currently the Echo now. I was like, all right, this is interesting. I don't know if I want to fly back right now, but I'll go ahead and do that.
So think about other engineers at Amazon. Is your path typical for people in this position?
Most of the time, most of my coworkers are fresh out of college. You'll see a number of other industry hires. So some of my coworkers either worked in Calgary for oil exploration, or you'll see people that did a number of other jobs throughout the place. So like one of my coworkers, he worked at EMC for a while doing storage and a bunch of other crazy math stuff, and then he took a job at Amazon. So you get a variety of perspectives there. But most of the time, you're going to deal with mostly college hires and people that have just been eating the Amazon dog food for years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So kind of thinking back to the interview, what was that interview process like?
So the interview process was, for me, 2 phone screens, and then an on-site, which was about 5 people, a panel of 5. Not all at one time, but come in one after the other, after the other, after the other. And then that was it, except for the fact that my loop, which isn't typical of most loops, was mostly a big design loop. So since I didn't write that much code on the board, they sent me a take-home problem to do within 90 minutes. So I sent that back, and then I got an offer. So I was like, okay, it's great. So, but yeah,
How did you prepare for all that?
Ooh, how did I prepare for that? So I spaced out my phone screens and I spaced out my on-site. So since I was
very smart.
so I was actually happy at LexisNexis, so I was just like, all right, well, I'm not gonna rush it the way I probably did it on a number of bomb Google interviews. So I do one, and then it's like, all right, let me schedule that at a convenient time for the interviewer. So it's like, all right, let me not schedule during his lunch break, and let me not schedule during my lunch break. Let's see what can happen. So then I scheduled the second one maybe about 4 to 6 weeks later, and then the on-site maybe a few weeks later. So
Let me ask you this real quick. Is that something that you would recommend others to do? Space it out like that?
when you're in college, no. If you're currently happy at your job, then I'd say, yeah, if you think you need the prep time for that, then yeah. I didn't really do that much prep for the Amazon interview. I'd probably research some linked lists, some graphs. I did read Programming Interviews Exposed during the phone screens all the way up to on-sites. But that was pretty much it. I did a bunch of reading after the interview after I realized, dang, I made a bunch of mistakes. That's kind of bad. But and I wish I probably had done a bit more prep, but I didn't do that much prep before. So
Okay.
yeah.
Cool.
So,
So,
go
sorry,
ahead, Danielle.
no, I was just thinking about like what kind of, in addition to the problem that you had to work out, like what other kind of questions did they ask you?
So Amazon will ask, so I think I got a few questions about the work I've done, the crunch time, how I deliver things within various constraints of time, or when I just had to go that extra mile of actually working long hours, lots of days consecutively in order to actually get something to ship. And so you pretty much get behavioral questions like that. Since I've been on the interviewing end, we pretty much ask most of those questions were based off of the Amazon leadership principles, which we truly believe in the Amazon leadership principles. So most of those questions were centered around those. I didn't do enough homework before to know that, but those were the types of behavioral situational questions that you get asked to kind of focus and center around what leadership principles you're strong in, along with the actual tech questions, which is
Okay.
like so.
Excellent, excellent. So when someone is hiring for someone in your position, what do they typically look for? What skills and experiences do they consider most valuable?
That's interesting. So usually when a recruiter and a manager look at a resume, they're pretty much looking to see what they can how they think you'll do on the interview based off of that. So they'll look for programming languages and depth of problems and how long you've actually been in a particular role, depths of problems, and a variety of things that you've actually delivered. And so once they make that determination, yeah, we can bring them in for a loop, but let's go ahead and screen them first with a phone screen
Hmm.
or invite them to a hiring event, even though there might be a phone screen before the hiring event. Then usually the phone screen is meant to determine whether a person thinks that he actually raises the bar based off the number of people that may actually be in that role and whether they exemplify some of the Amazon leadership principles along with being just a sharp engineer for the most part.
Okay.
And you said loop a couple times. What is that?
Said what?
Did you say loop?
Yes, interview loop. So we
Okay.
call them loops, but yeah, it's pretty much the process of phone screen, maybe other phone screen, interviews, and then make a decision for the hiring process. So
Okay.
that's what I mean by that for an interview loop. So
Okay.
usually the loop is usually at work. The loop is just the 5 people that are going to do the interview, and
Okay. So going back to the skills that you were talking about, like how would you recommend somebody go about developing those skills?
so one of the things I would say that you pretty much need going about developing those skills. So I hate to say it, but a computer science degree will actually get you the majority of things you need to know to actually get to the software, get to the interview process, and actually be able to pass it.
And
What makes
let me ask you this:
yeah.
why is that? Because now you see
Remembering
a lot of
everything you learn from college. What's that?
I said now you see a lot of developers boot camps popping up, but you mentioned computer science degree.
Right. And the reason I say that is because most of the time your interviewers are going to grill you on things that they learned in college and that you learned in college and things that are actually integral to some of the problems you work on.
Hmm.
So you might get asked some graph questions, some linked lists, and just basic things that you probably need to figure out how to apply to whatever the programming problem is in front of you. Because we can't really give you a project that is actually something that you would do at work because that's just big. That's just too big to do in 45 minutes in the gauge, and that doesn't really tell us if you'd be able to actually figure out how to build a graphing tree of trying to figure out dependencies between actual packages that you're about to actually compile software with, if you'd be able to write that or not in crunch time if no one else has ever done it. So that's why I say a computer science degree is probably the best thing, going through a rigorous program. If not, then possibly just reading a number of computer science texts, so structures of interpretation of computer programs, and dang, I can't believe I'm recommending that book.
It's on the interwebs now.
I know. I also recommend the Algorithm Design Manual, which is a very math-heavy book, but it will actually get you thinking algorithmically, which kind of helps you through the interview process. So being able to do that, and actually solving a number of problems. Well, LeetCode seems to have a good database of problems that are actually seem to be what the industry seems to ask a lot of. So being able to do those, which once you get the degree, then you and you have the solid background, and you actually know enough to actually know what is being talked about in the answers, you'll actually construct an appropriate solution for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
A boot camp may cover a lot of that, but I'm not too sure, because lots of boot camps are very web focused, which I know that there are some roles at Amazon where we will actually hire from boot camp programs for various jobs, and those people seem to do very well, but I haven't run any of those SDs at this point. So I do know a few of them. I know of a few of them now. So.
That's really good information to know, because you're seeing a lot of these boot camps pop up and a lot of people going through these programs. So knowing coming out of those that you could possibly get a job at Amazon, that's encouraging.
Right. So I know there's a boot camp program called ADA in Seattle that Amazon partners with, and so we allow a number of ADA participants to actually intern at Amazon.
Okay.
If they go through the interview process, which I don't know what the interview process is for ADA candidates, but once they do, like I said, they do very well in their roles. I haven't run any in the Alexa team now, so that's
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So next question here, what's the best way for potential candidates to demonstrate they have the necessary skills and experiences for a position?
Is that trying to actually get looked at via LinkedIn or through when you actually apply?
When you actually apply.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you apply, so unfortunately, I don't really know what happens when you apply. I know you go to an interview. I know you go to a resume black hole. Recruiters look at it, and then they make a decision on whether to present that to a hiring manager. I would say having an extensive bit of experience in a particular role and in particular jobs can help you through that. But usually, if you've actually built a lot of things, then I think that probably helps a lot. But I actually prefer the model of a recruiter just finds you on LinkedIn and actually says, "Hey, you should come interview," as opposed to you just apply. The application process probably works if you're internal. I know it also works if you have a referral, but anyone that just applies and just gets in, then I know that requires actual recruiters looking into it, seeing where you are, and I don't know if there's any computer filtering or not for that. So, but if your resume is good, then you should be able to get through all the recruiters.
So you mentioned recruiters a number of times. Is that a better avenue for people seeking employment at Amazon?
I think so, honestly. My personal opinion, yeah, that's pretty much the best route. Either a recruiter or somebody you know on the inside that can give you a referral. Actually applying, you probably will get the job if you're good and your resume looks good. But remember, there's still millions of people applying, so I don't know what that process looks like and how you stand out against all those. So.
Okay. So two questions kind of come out of that. What makes somebody's resume impressive? Let me make sure. What would make it impressive to you if you had to look at it?
So me, what I would look for were, if it were somebody fresh out of college, then I'd look for any research work they did while in college, because undergraduate research it shows that you've actually done a lot of things that are possibly interesting and can bring a bit of interesting perspective towards problem solving. Or actually, if you did some work, then some work is good too. So if you do some extra work on the side, that probably helps your resume stand out amongst the swath of others. For me, anyway. Also, something else I would probably say is if you are in industry, then just the general amount of work you do will probably help with that a lot. So if you actually work on a number of things. So a lot of the times, most of my work was pretty much back office applications or enterprise apps. But I did so many of them, and some of them were pretty cool, some of them crazy, that I guess it made my resume and my LinkedIn profile look pretty interesting. So.
Okay. So speaking of LinkedIn and just having a web presence, what sites should they be using? GitHub, LinkedIn? Are there any others?
So for recruiting, having an extensive LinkedIn, having an extensive GitHub does help. I didn't think it did at one point, except for there's a friend of mine who I went to college with, and for a period of time, he had like over 1,000 commits in like a few months on GitHub. And I know he also wrote lots of articles and lots of submissions to Linux.com and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so I know that internally, or some people like to say that he was a principal candidate. So he's looking for a job. So he asked me about it, and it's like, all right, I'll refer him. And then it's like, oh, we already have him in the system, and he's supposed to be pegged towards this role. So I was like, all right, cool, interview him for that. And so I think he got an offer, but he took a job at Google instead. So yeah.
Okay.
So having an extensive GitHub does help. What you're doing on GitHub is interesting. It has to be, I don't know what kind of caliber it has to be. Most of his contributions were actually to some Linux source and a bunch of other networking things and his own crazy Linux distro. But on LinkedIn, you really just have to talk about the skills you have, and the jobs you do, and highlight any accomplishments you made or any of the impressive work you did. So. You know, my LinkedIn is pretty boring, so I don't even know if I'm listening to my own advice.
Well, it was enough to get somebody to contact you. So.
Yeah.
Now I have to go take a look at it.
Yeah.
I have to take a look at your LinkedIn profile.
My LinkedIn profile. It's probably pretty boring.
What everybody's doing right now. Like, what does your LinkedIn profile look like?
Right.
I just said I didn't listen to my own advice, so take that for its worth.
So, I know that, you were.
Oh, and I also forgot to mention the ladders. My recruiter contacted me via the ladders, so that also helps too. So another thing.
Talk about the ladders. I didn't even know that was still around.
Are they still around? I don't know. I get emails from them every once in a while. I signed up for the ladders after I got laid off from my job in 2009, or sometime before then, because I was just like, all right, I'm going to see what the ladder is all about and see how things go. I never got any of the jobs I applied for on that site, but recruiters did contact me, and that's how the Amazon, so the recruiter that I talked to that's internally after I got hired, she said she found me on the ladders, but most of my recruiter contacts were via LinkedIn, so I don't know where the wires got crossed there. So.
I'm sorry. What's the ladders? I never heard of it.
Ladders is a site that is for pretty much recruiting for 100K and up jobs. I'm sure that's still around. Theladders.com.
Ah.
Cool.
Yeah, they're still around. So yeah, their site looks pretty simplistic now, but yeah, it's interesting. Okay, that's a sidetrack.
Oh, okay. So, we just talked about it. We know that you were recruited, but how would you recommend that someone go about finding out about jobs at Amazon or in your field?
In the field, all right. So in the field, it's really all you. So I'll just say in the field, it doesn't. The job quality you get will probably it may be what you're looking for. It may not be. But if you just post a resume on Dice, recruiters start contacting you like crazy. At first, if you have enough of the keywords in your resume, they start contacting you like crazy, and you'll start getting these job offers for these people calling you about SharePoint stuff, and it's like I did SharePoint maybe a few times, and I guess it's on my resume, so thanks for the contact. But usually, I like to say word of mouth is usually the best thing, honestly, which is horrible, and unfortunate, but yeah.
What do you mean word of mouth?
So when my friend that works at Netflix, if he has a job opening, he's looking around for some sharp engineer. He'll probably ask some of his network for some people to see if they're interested and if they want to get in. Then he pretty much tells them about it and just gives a resume to someone, and then they just get tagged to a rec that's probably open on the website, and then they pretty much go through a loop, because usually if they've been vetted by someone that's already in, then that gives them a bit more credence. That's what I mean by word of mouth. So it is a bit of a networking type deal.
Okay.
That's the best way. But finding out about jobs, usually the website is generally the website, which, like I said, is possibly a resume black hole, but not always. And I know on my team it's definitely not a black hole anymore, since we're trying to hire like crazy SDs at this point. But yeah, usually just the website in general and word of mouth.
Okay.
Hope
You
I didn't
mentioned too.
contradict myself in what I just said.
Sorry, what did you say?
I said I hope I didn't just contradict myself in whatever I said.
It's okay. You mentioned too that you had a lot of recruiting connections. So
No,
can you
no,
talk?
I don't have a lot of recruiting connections. I just
Oh,
said that if you post a resume on Dice, then you
oh,
can
okay.
have an email flood of contacts from recruiters pretty much the next day, usually.
Okay.
So,
So real
So,
quick, I've been totally ignoring the Q&A questions coming in. So
uh-oh, are there that
sorry
many?
about that. I'm going to get to some of them right now. So let's go. So what are your thoughts on coding boot camps? This is coming from Zane. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Zaneh.
What are my thoughts on coding boot camps?
Yeah.
So for a number of enterprise application jobs, I think they're interesting, because the majority of enterprise application jobs, which is the majority of software development work out there, I think a coding bootcamp will probably get you up to par to actually be able to do the work, because most of the work is not that complicated to where you need to understand red black trees in order to be able to build an app that talks to a database, puts data in there, gets data out, does some fancy stuff with it, and build a website around it. You don't really need a college degree for that. So coding boot camps can get you ready for that. And since the majority of jobs that we talk about in the industry are those types of jobs, then I think a coding boot camp is great for those. At Amazon, it's interesting. I don't know if that would be the best route to get in, but for any other enterprise application building job or IT app job, then yeah, that's great. It's perfect, because because of doing that all the time. It's just like, I haven't used a binary search tree in a while, and I haven't had to, because the majority of the problems are pretty much dealing with databases and just putting data and doing fancy stuff with it. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay, this one's coming from Antoinette Smith. Was getting the MS in computer science worth it? If so, how has it benefited you in your professional career
Ooh.
and or day to day?
All right. So initially, when I lived in Atlanta, I said that my master's degree probably wouldn't help me, because the difference between the master's and bachelor's degree in income just was not there. It wasn't worth it. I got my master's degree. I always say I got it on accident, because my friend Jeremy, who you know, Greg, He was at my house all the time when he was actually started getting his master's in CS. And,
Mm.
I mean, we used to go over and study over, and it's just like, you're going to do this the whole time you get your master's. He's like, yeah. It's like, all right, well, okay, I guess I'm going to go get a master's degree too. So we did that. I found out it's been actually pretty helpful though. People respect you a little bit more. There's some jobs I've gotten because I had the master's degree. It does help you stand out a bit as far as resume fodder. Well, maybe I shouldn't call it resume fodder. Resume enablement. It helps you a lot there. You learn some interesting topics that are good overall. And then when you start asking for crazy salary requirements, then it also helps. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So let me see. Go through
Probably
the
learned
next
a lot
question.
more from I probably learned a lot more than I give credit to with my master's degree. So,
Would you say that networking events are extremely important? This comes from Joshua.
ooh, networking events. Yes and no. It depends on the context. I say yes because if you're at a useful networking event
Hmm.
where people are actually doing things, you can actually make a lot of good connections and either use them for they can use you for consultation or particular jobs and everything else, and you can use them for advice. So you meet a lot of interesting people at networking events. But it's still context dependent because sometimes you go to networking events and you don't meet anybody interesting. So maybe there isn't too much that they can do for you. So it depends on the context of the networking event.
Okay. You still there, Danielle?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm
That's right.
my video dropped, but I'm here.
Okay. You want to ask the next question?
Oh, sure. Okay, we got all the comments.
We got some of them.
Okay.
We'll come back at the end if time permits.
Okay. So just now we kind of have some high level questions. Is there anything else that, any advice you want to give to folks, about entering into this field?
I say when you get into the field, make sure you actually love building things and make sure you love building things. And I think that's the biggest thing because you see a lot of people, they may get into it just for the money, and if they get into it just for the money, and then they are confronted with something that's extremely math heavy, they're just like, why do I have to do all this hard stuff? And I don't have any stories around that are that great. But
Okay.
I think we know that.
I say make sure you actually love building things once you get into the field. That's
Okay.
pretty much the biggest piece of advice before you get into it. After that, make sure you know how to teach yourself things. Being able to teach yourself things is one of the best benefits because after you get the degrees, and then you still gonna have to learn things on the job. You have to learn things on the fly. You have to learn about maybe some advanced computing topic, or you might just have to learn something that's simple that you just didn't cover. It reminds me of when I had to learn Visual Basic on the fly for the consulting gig that I managed to get myself into. I didn't know anything about it. And of course, at Georgia Tech, we don't teach Visual Basic because, well, most of the students are like, it's drag and drop programming. There's no right actual code. So, but yeah, I just admitted to writing Visual Basic professionally. Oh well, cool.
So, um, any advice for people who are specifically looking at going to Amazon?
Um, Make sure you study the leadership principles because you will get grilled on those. Prepare for an Amazon interview the same way you probably prepare for a Google, Facebook interview. Do some studying because the thing is, you never know what you're going to get in an interview loop. And another thing is, if you get rejected, then do not let that be a reflection on you because sometimes getting in is just getting the proper loop for you is probably just plain dumb luck at sometimes.
Mm.
So
So I have a question about culture that comes up a lot in these tech conversations, especially when it deals with diversity in tech.
Mhm.
So what role does culture play in determining if you accepted a position?
So we use our leadership principles as determinants for culture, along with making sure you have actual passion for learning things and growing. If you have excitement about the job and computing in general, then you pretty much kind of meet most of the culture, and the rest is just leadership principles at that point. So unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily reflect in some of the diversity numbers, but I guess I don't necessarily know the right answer for that. But that's pretty much what we look for when it comes to culture. So usually, culture fit is usually leadership principles and just having a general passion and excitement for the work you're doing and what you can potentially learn.
Okay.
Yes.
So do you have any suggestions for how to present questions regarding the company's culture in an interview?
Ooh. So that's pretty much asking what work is like and how teams interact with one another. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Um, ooh. So those questions are very team specific because some teams are very quiet, they get work done, and they may talk to each other, they may have fun with each other, they may not. It's just varies. So one of the things you can ask, well, how would you ask that? I've never actually asked about culture because I'm usually just like I like the fact that I'm going to be working on an interesting problem.
Uh,
That if you just leave me alone and you give me something interesting to work on, then I'll be happy for the most part. As long as I'm not bored and you aren't saying anything stupid, I'm good. Um,
Gotcha. I guess, like for example, in one of my last interviews, some of the questions that I kind of posed was, how do you handle internal conflicts? Um, what was another one? Um, how do they go about setting goals, things like that, to kind of give you an overview of how the company operates internally, and how they do things within the team.
so internal conflicts are usually if you have an internal conflict is usually about something work related, and
Mhm.
just having data to support your assertions is usually the best way to go about resolving any problem. So having data, having good examples, and then after a while, it's just going to come down to a team vote, depending on how your teams run, or a manager decision about what's going to happen. That's where all the conflicts I've seen actually stem from, um, at Amazon for the most part for internal conflicts. What was the second part of your question?
The second part of my
Yeah,
question
it's about
was,
internal conflicts.
oh, that was it. Do you have any suggestions for how to present questions regarding the company's culture in an interview? That was the second part.
Ooh.
So,
You can ask about, so like I said, internal conflicts is mostly something work related.
Uh-huh.
You can always ask about operational burden, but that doesn't really deal too much with any cultural issues you may have. I don't think I don't know. So I don't
Okay.
have
so I
to
have
do that.
a couple questions about that though. So you mentioned, you talked by some of your answers. It sounds like how would you describe the Amazon culture for your team?
So the Amazon culture for my team is generally heads down. We get a lot of work done. Um, you don't have to carry anybody because most of the time everybody's smart enough to actually be able to do all the work. And usually my culture is we get some work done. We might have internal conversations, a few jokes. Most of our jokes are around juvenile things like Yu-Gi-Oh cards or Pokemon or something like that. That might be something completely unwork related, but generally that's our culture for the most part. And afterwards, We might play some card games, and then that's usually it. Occasionally there's beer, occasionally there's vodka, occasionally there's whiskey. On my old team, there's lots of whiskey. Um, Whiskey and Pop Tarts. But
Not together, right?
Right.
you'd be surprised. But yeah, usually that's pretty much how the culture usually works. Usually lots of games. It's a very nerdy culture. A few people play ping pong. When people want to bring in Nerf guns, I'm usually like, no, let's not do that. I have a bad story around Nerf guns that we won't get into. Kind of embarrassing, but yeah. So generally our culture, most of the cultures of the teams I'm on, is usually Pokemon, Pop Tarts, and whiskey or some kind of alcohol.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a question from one of the Q&A comments here. This one comes from Clifford Samuels Jr. What's up, Cliff? What did you negotiate for your job at Amazon, benefits, tech conferences, and were you successful in your negotiation?
Ooh, so benefits. Actually, unfortunately, I didn't really get a chance to negotiate as much as I probably should have when it came to my offer because moving from the South to here in Seattle, the income disparity is so great that what I thought was good was just not as great as it could have been. So they gave me a lot more than actually what I wanted. And now it's just like, man, if they did that, then I can't really argue too much about it. So that was one of the best things about it. So benefits-wise, there wasn't too much negotiation. When it comes to conferences and things I might want to go to that are usually, if it's part of, so if I do it from the diversity programs, then it's pretty much usually a given, and I usually don't have any problems with my managers. For other things, like PR things, it's usually a process. But generally, I can get approved because my VP is usually pretty supportive of whatever, of some of the crazy stuff I might want to do. So.
Okay.
Cool.
So negotiation usually doesn't happen that often. As long as I have data to back it up and back up like that, it's great. Sometimes it's not, but sometimes I have that. Or it's just generally good for Amazon as a whole, then we're usually pretty good. I haven't had anybody say no to anything, so that's good.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Any more, Greg?
Yeah, let's see. Here's a good one from Charles Franklin. What skill do you look for that doesn't appear on a resume?
That doesn't appear on the resume?
Yeah.
Generally curiosity about things to learn. How much you like learning. That doesn't appear on a resume. Well, it kind of does appear on a resume if your skill set is like taking up a paragraph or something. If you just put it up together, usually that appears on the resume, but generally you won't see it. So curiosity, the inquisitiveness, excitement about learning new things, and about building things for the most part. So those are things that don't appear on a resume, but generally that's the biggest thing that we look for.
Okay.
And wanting to get stuff done. So.
Okay.
Excellent. Danielle?
All right. So you have a lot of experience. So like just thinking back on all the different places you worked, what are some questions that you feel like you wish you would have asked during the interview, or you feel like you recommend other people always ask?
So at Amazon, which is different, I wish I would have asked about operational burden. And that's because Amazon has a culture of you build it, you run it. And I actually kind of like that, but there's some companies where you build it, you just throw it over a wall and somebody else supports it, and you don't get called in for something that's just crazy wrong. But I wish people would, asking about that shows that you actually kind of either care about how well your software is going to run. And it also shows that if you don't like the type of pace that's going to give you, if you're interviewing for a crazy team, or I won't call it a crazy team, I just call it a team with a crazy operational burden, then it shows that you are that curious. I wish I'd asked that. And I also wish I'd asked about the testing culture and how important it is for some teams versus others. Because there is a bit of a discrepancy there depending on what project you're trying to get launched and how old the software is. But over the years, I think I would appreciate learning about how a company does testing, as well as operational burden and things like that. And
And real quick, for those who don't know what operational burn is, can you kind of explain that?
so operational burden, so when you build software and it's pretty much going to run on a service, then the operational burden is how many tickets you produce and how many issues or things that are problematic does your software actually create. So that's what operational burden means to me. How many bugs you've got, and how many times am I going to be paged in the middle of the night because my service is not responding fast enough to requests. So,
Okay. And, and when you say testing, do you mean user testing or do
I
you mean
mean unit testing,
unit
system
testing?
design, functional testing, integration testing, and how easy is it for me to actually change a piece of code without and knowing that this is going to actually break something. How well is that instrumented? Along with knowing how well things actually work, and do you have an idea of how well your system is instrumented enough to tell you how fast things are, if there are any problems, you've got memory leaks, and things like that. I know it's a bit specific, but those are technical things that I wish I did ask a bit more about. Of course, on my project, there were none because it was all greenfield, but in some teams, that's actually an important thing to ask. So,
Okay. So what are some do's and don'ts that we should be aware of, things that you have seen either before or after an employee has been hired? What are some of those things where you're like, oh, okay, you should be aware of this, and then some of those things that you shouldn't be?
so one thing I would say is this probably applies to people that get internships more than not is if you get an internship and you actually get an offer in college and then you go back to school, don't just decide you're not going to take any programming classes and you're just going to rest on your laurels because you already have a job. Because usually, if you get into that habit of laziness, then you're going to get in and you're going to forget about or you're not going to be able to cope with the amount of real work you have to do. Um, Another thing is don't really just stay on the job or during the interview like, can I just stay at this role and do I really have to like try to actually grow into another role? Don't say things like that. Those are some things that I've heard on various interviews, and it's just like usually since most companies are growth minded and you're working with a number of millennials that always want to grow, then that's just pretty much a bad sign that you're gonna only get there, do some work, and leave, and not really be available or ready for crunch time or some crazy problem that you don't really know the answer to, but you still have to figure out.
Okay. We still have a few minutes. Let's take a couple of questions from Q&A. Let's
All
see.
right.
This comes from Clifford Samuels Jr. How is your work-life balance at Amazon, and do you make time for yourself to avoid burnout?
So I probably should make more time for myself to avoid burnout. But my work-life balance is actually pretty good. I usually work about a good 8 to let me rephrase that. I usually work a good 7 to 10 hours a day. My work-life balance is pretty good. Usually when I come home, I am home and I don't check email that often. Actually, I might never check email in the afternoons. Maybe if I'm waiting on something. Weekends, I generally don't. But like I tell people this at most jobs. Your managers are going to push you as far as you allow them to push you. And if that's not far enough, you're probably gonna get fired. But generally, if you set some boundaries of things that you are going to do, not then that's generally respected. So my work-life balance is pretty good. Even though when I'm on call, being on call usually means that I'm just going to not have too much excitement in life because if I get paid, I need to be around and be able to actually respond to that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Another question from Christine Jackson. If you don't know anyone that works at a particular company but want to apply, what is the best way of going about it so that you can get the interview?
Ooh, I don't know anybody that works there. So I didn't know anybody that worked at Amazon when I got the job. Usually that was, like I said, that was a recruiter contact, which usually recruiter contacts work very well. If you don't know anybody, then you can still apply, but you have to hope that you're better than a number of other people that are applying, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't really have a real answer to that.
Okay.
I'm gonna jump in with the Danielle is not shy answer. I always just go to LinkedIn and introduce myself to people that are tangentially related to me and have like a back and forth conversation on LinkedIn about why we should know each other and how I'm interested in this job and try to get an introduction that way. But I'm not shy. So
That sounds so extroverted. I wouldn't be able to.
How does that work? How are you initiating these conversations?
okay, so let me tell you.
Okay.
A while back, I was interested in a role at Google, and I didn't know anybody in this division of Google, but there was I had an ex, like somebody I went to grad school with, used to work at Google. So I sent him a note, asked him if he knew someone there. He didn't, but he didn't know anyone in that division, but he knew someone who was still at Google. So he sent a note introducing me to that guy, and that guy sent a note introducing me to the guy on that team. So, yeah, that's what I did.
That works. That's just 3 degrees of separation. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you just have to be patient and persistent.
yeah,
It
that
took
works.
about 2 weeks to find out that I didn't actually want that job, but it was
That was
kind of
useful. Yes, I like that.
All right, we're going to take one last question from Q&A, and then we're going to wrap this up. This comes from Paul McNeil. What if you have entrepreneurship goals? Are there any policies to allow that to happen fairly easily?
Yes and no. The policy is no, no, no. You work for Amazon, you pretty much work for Amazon. You can't moonlight, none of that stuff.
Hmm.
The reason I say yes and no though is because you're gonna get a stock award, and if you just save your stock award, wait for the stock to be a large amount, and you just sell it all at that point, then you pretty much have enough capital to possibly maybe bootstrap your business. So that's why I say there might be a yes in there. So
Okay.
yeah, but the policy is no, no, no.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the last of our questions. Apologize to anybody we didn't get to in the Q&A. Do you have any last words, Mike?
Yeah, just study hard and don't beat yourself up if you don't get it. You can always just try again, and that's it.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Mike, for joining us tonight on this episode of the Tech Life. Definitely appreciate it.
No problem. It's been
Thanks
fun.
everyone else for tuning in. If anybody wants to follow you, are you on Twitter or do you have anything out there?
So I'm on Twitter, and my Twitter handle I think is Mike Dorsey Jr. MikeDorsyJr.
Okay.
I don't really say much on Twitter. You might see something insanely related to Pokemon, or actually related to Pokemon or wine, or just living in Seattle, but that's about it.
Okay.
I'm on Instagram with the same name. Actually, I think that's my Facebook name too. So yeah, and you might get something interesting on it. Maybe not. I'm
And
not
if you
allowed to talk about work, so you're not gonna get anything like that aside from that's already public. So, oh man, Alexa's cool. Yeah. Oh, and we are hiring so many SDEs that you should apply. If you're great and know how to get in contact with me, then I'll look over your resume. That's not making any promises, but like I said, we're hiring like crazy. So come on.
Okay. And if you don't find them out there on Twitter or whatever, you can come bug them in the Slack channel.
Yeah, I'm always there. I'm always online. So yeah.
Right.
You're there too, right?
Right. Just go to blacksandtechnology.net, do a search for Slack, and click on the invite form, and you can bug Mike all day. Well, thanks a lot, Mike. We definitely appreciate it. Thanks, everyone else, for tuning in. Thanks to our hosts, the people at Team Gaslight. We definitely appreciate them hosting us. And if you have any comments or suggestions, send those to contact us at blacksandtechnology.net. Somebody asked about this Nifty Bit T-shirt.
Yeah, I want one of those shirts.
You can go to Blacks and Technology. At the bottom, there's a link that says Shop. And you can buy all the Blacks and Technology gear that your closet can hold.
All right.
All right. Thanks a lot. And definitely be on the lookout for our next event coming up soon. Just check out our website. We'll be tweeting about it. And we'll be putting up a blog post. But thanks a lot. Good night.
All right. Good night.